Welcome to episode 52 of the What Happens Next podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you get the most out of the next chapter of your life. And often on What Happens Next, we like to share lived experiences of people who have gone through retirement, have unique insights, and are in the thick of the next chapter of their lives. And that's why it was a pleasure to interview a guy called Damian Stancombe and share the insights that he shares in this interview. Because Damian's not only going through the journey himself, he's also worked in the world of financial services and particularly pensions and retirement for many, many years. So what Damian's seen is not only the personal view of retirement as he's in this chapter as we speak, but also helped others and looked at the issues and challenges professionally for many, many years. In this interview, we talk about a number of subjects. We talk about reframing transition in our lives, potentially planning 5 years before you plan to retire and having a blueprint that's all about the last 60 paydays of your working life. We looked at using the money that you've got to potentially pay for the big ticket items and living the life we want in the early years of retirement, whilst we've got our physical energy and the willingness to do the big things. We highlight the need to focus on physical well-being and health and wellness. And we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and see how that fits into the whole retirement planning journey. I know you're going to get a lot out of this interview. Damian not only shares some real gems from his professional life, but also the learnings of what he's going through, both emotionally, but also thinking about as he's in this retirement journey himself. I think you're going to enjoy it. Let's go on the show. Part of the issue we've got when we're thinking about what happens next in our lives is having the self-awareness, having the introspection to be able to think about what the gaps in our well-being are. And we're doing loads of work at the minute with What Happens Next to build solutions that are going to help you think about well-being in a nuanced way when you're thinking about how it applies to your life. One of the first things we've built that you can use today is our What Happens Next quiz. It's free to do, takes about 5 minutes, but what it will do is give you an insight into the areas of strengths when it comes to your well-being and the areas you might want to improve. You can take the What Happens Next quiz at whathappensnext.life/quiz. And I hope it helps you in your journey to work out what happens next for you. Good morning and welcome to What Happens Next, the channel dedicated to having conversations about that stage of life where we reach a crossroads, or as one of my other interviewees put it a couple of weeks ago, a T-junction, because there's no in your head, there's no moving forward with what you're doing. And you've got to make some decisions in your life about what's next. Now, conventionally, that may have been called retirement. And for a lot of you watching, that retirement concept still may be entirely the right word to use. But interestingly, with a lot of my clients who are at this stage in their life, they're looking at that next step and thinking, well, actually, I don't want to stop. I want to carry on, but have more control, autonomy, freedom in my life to do what I want to do. So this channel is dedicated to having conversations and share ideas and interview people with unique insights about how you might think about that next stage in your life. I'm on a mission, and I mentioned to Damian earlier on, I think the idea of the What Happens Next project is to help me in 10 years. So it's definitely beneficial for me to have these conversations. But I am on a mission to help people live better lives in their 50s and 60s when they're thinking about what happens next. Because I've seen so many people work that extra couple of years and then tell me I wished I wouldn't have done it. So if we can start people planning, preparing early and thinking about what's next for you, that's the idea of this channel and the conversations I'm having and have had on what happens next. We've been told via email from a lot of people have really helped with their thinking in this area. One thing before we start, we've got a quiz that you can do that is more framed not only about money but around well-being, because actually when we're thinking about making change in our life, then one of the fundamental things we could do, particularly if we've been really focused on the accumulation of wealth, is think about just life in a more rounded, nuanced way. And what this quiz enables you to do, and there's a QR code below, is think about where you are from a well-being perspective, look at the aspects that you might need improvement on or the aspects you're really strong at, and make positive change with the insight the quiz provides. It's free to do, takes about 10 minutes, and then you get free PDF just sent straight to your inbox, so you can do something with it. On that note, let's start our conversation with Damian. Damian, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much indeed, Chris.
Good. And you are sporting a particularly fine tan at the minute, because I know you've just been away.
I've literally just come back from holiday. And when I say literally, I mean within the hours.
I was worried about getting a really stern email from your new wife.
Yes, should say it was a honeymoon. Yeah, no, she was fine. In fact, actually, one of the things you'll find is that they don't like you being in the house. But we'll come on to that, I'm pretty sure. So doing something that's not in the way of what they're looking to do. So doing this is absolutely fine. It gives her time to do whatever it is she wants. So, but I must say, before we start, and on that bit about coming back from holiday, if you can imagine today, if you come back from work, come back from a 2-week holiday, how you're trying to get your brain into action. Yeah. With that 2-week holiday and you're back Thursday, times that by 10 is how I'm feeling at this moment in time. I've been away for 20 weeks almost. So if I'm a bit ring rusty as we start, now you know why.
Oh, no, I appreciate you saying that. But this is a chat, whatever comes out is certainly right. However, we are live on YouTube and LinkedIn, and I've got a comments box on my screen. So if you're watching and you feel free that you'd like to make comments on our conversation, feel free to do that as well. And if there's any questions you've got for Damian, feel free to let us know. So start for 10, Damian. Just tell us a little bit about you, mate.
It's probably easy to tell you who I'm not. Because I think when you hear the fact that, you're a pension professional, you leap into all these ideas. I'm not an actuary. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not an investment specialist. I'm not one of these people that produce product. I'm actually, if I come back down to the essence, a kind of humanist. I learned my trade in abattoirs doing presentations. I learned it on tech parks in Cambridge. I learned it doing night shifts and working with people in Bells Hill. I'm a humanist because I sat and I talked and I listened to people.
Yeah.
And what I've always tried to convey in the job I've done and the kind of businesses I've led is that humanist, people-centered approach. The idea that people don't see life through silos. They see it, and you've talked about it, about wealth, health, purpose. You've got to have those connection points. So that is me in a nutshell. But from a philosophical kind of point of view, there's a great book, if we are doing book recommendations, I think it's 1, None, and 100,000. And the idea that if you're trying to say who you are, everyone on this kind of podcast will have a different view of who I am. So there's no point me sitting there kind of worrying about that. You've all got a different view of me. I'm just kind of saying what I think I am. But I think that kind of humanist side. The easier things to talk about is what I've done in my kind of life, as I say, from those early days of consultancy. And I reckon I was a half-decent consultant, worked on some very large corporate accounts, did a lot of traveling, managed to get over to the US and to Australia to give me that more rounded view of life. And then as you kind of hit your kind of, I suppose, late 30s, went into a very strategic direction away from consultancy. headed up effectively DC practices, trying to strive, not again for this kind of one point of view of it's all about pensions. Wealth is far broader than that. So instead of it being a typical EBC, I kind of created what was a health and wealth business, trying to get the synergy between a symbiotic relationship between how an employer saw you as the employee and how you as the employee could value the relationship with the employer, proper synergies. And I think the interesting thing maybe we'll get onto today is where I think those synergies have broken down when we get into this later stage of work.
Yeah, yeah. I one of the interesting things there is that all sectors and professions certainly do it, but the world of financial services, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we think about the product as the product, and actually the product is helping people live wealthier lives regardless of where they stand. I think we could probably have better conversations with people if we viewed it from their point of view. And we, I'm really lucky. When somebody comes in to see me, it's just one of those things where you get the opportunity to sit around and go, well, what is a life well lived? One of the questions I like is, what does a life well lived look like for you? And money plays a part, but actually it's about family and it's about friends and it's about experiences. It's all of the stuff that sort of you love. But one interesting point you made, and I think it's pertinent to what we're going to be talking about today, is often I believe that your identity is just linked to what you do. You go to a party or an event and people go, so what do you do? I was like, that doesn't define me as a human. But how have you found that transition from doing what you were doing every day, stopping what you were doing, and what's been the impact on identity for you?
Yeah, it is a really strange one because, one, I'm not sure about you, but when you're sitting at I don't get invited to that many parties. I'm quite dour. But if I was to be invited to a party, the last thing I ever really wanted to say is I did pensions.
Yeah.
Certainly back in the day. Nowadays, you're like the focal point of the room because everyone wants that conversation with you because it's all, you tend to hang out with your peers, don't you? So you suddenly were defined by, you know more about pensions than anyone else. Talk to me about it.
There's an age when it becomes
just drops away.
Right? There's an age when
it becomes very popular.
Yeah.
You find when you're interesting suddenly. And it tends to be this... Go
on, sorry.
But the question they always tend to ask is this: how much do I need? How much? How do I know? I've just met you. I have no understanding of what it is that you want from the rest of your life, where you want to live, who you want to be. And so there is an inanity to these kind of questions. As you say, you kind of suddenly find that you don't have that anymore. You are just a retired person who is in the same space as the next person that sat with you. And you realize together that you're actually struggling with the same thought processes of what does this look like now? How do I go from where I was to what I want to be? And it is a journey. It is an absolute journey. And I would define where I am now in what I call my moonment. I know I've been on a honeymoon, but my movement is this early stage of retirement where I'm really in reset. I haven't really got to the point of defining anything because I just simply have not had the time. I'm living in this first flush of time. And it hasn't defined me yet in a way that, as I say, I was shaped for the last 35 years of my working life. I knew who I was. I knew what I was supposed to do every single day of the week. I knew how I had to be nice to the people that worked with me. And I knew how to basically nice to clients. None of that suddenly matters. Not one of it.
So interesting. So I suppose the big factor, and the reason that we wanted you on What Happens Next is your yes, you've got that background in the world of pensions and the world of money, but more interestingly, you're going through the thought process live because you're talking about on LinkedIn quite a lot. And it's
Yeah.
interesting how so when you think about time, how are you viewing time differently now to the run up to this point, and what's changed in your perspective, do you think?
Um, I think the big change is, I've described it as this gift of time that we all, we live for the weekend when we get 2 days. Now you've got 7. You've got the
Yeah,
gift of 7 days, and it's trying to fill meaningful stuff into those 7 days. And it's not easy. I've talked to a lot of other people. Again, one of the great things about conversation, you learn from others that have gone before. Listen to people, make the small things count. You've
yeah,
got to basically create something in the day to give it a meaning, a purpose, an event. And it doesn't matter how small it is, it wraps the day around it.
yeah,
Otherwise, it becomes a splodge of
yeah,
this thing. And I think that is when you can get into a really dangerous kind of position. Um, One of the kind of characteristics I see, and I'll talk from a very personal point.
yeah,
Alcohol,
yeah,
it's one of those things that you sit and you'd have a drink at night, and then suddenly you sit there and say, oh, well, I could sit and have a drink now. And you've got to kind of say, no, you don't. But I can see how people basically kind of fall into the traps of I just can fill time. I'm doing something that's probably destructive rather than constructive, because we
yeah.
just physically do not have an understanding of it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really insightful, and I suppose the big thing then is that concept of retirement. Just one day being full time at work, and then the next day stopping. Do we need to look at that in a different way?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, I'll go back to the story, my creation story of what actually happened. And I suspect I'm like most people. You've got a couple of years to age where I guess within the workplace, after doing everything I did, maybe I didn't feel valued as much as I could have done. Now, I could have took a decision to carry on working and just sat on income coming through the door. But I've always been driven by the value I add. And suddenly I didn't feel that I
Yeah,
was. And there's a lot of other things about, you can only run into brick walls so many times. And, you've got a vision and a strategy that you want to deliver here that, basically they can't buy into. That's fine. That's the way that the world goes. But
yeah,
you then feel displaced.
yeah,
And rather than sitting there, as I say, just accepting my lot and going, you know what, I'm going to do the next 15 years coasting through, not adding productive value. I did something very, very weird. I gave my organization 5 years notice that I was retiring. I
yeah,
literally did my 60-day or 60 payday countdown to retirement. Because 5 years sounds so Bowie. 5 years, a long time. 60 paydays. And that was the trigger to start me thinking about human capital this side of retirement, the things I wanted to achieve this side of retirement when I had probably more money and
yeah,
freedom in the sense of that kind of disposable income than I ever would have the other side of retirement. And
yeah,
that 5 year, 60 payday countdown started to shape my thinking, not just about what retirement looks like, but actually how I was going to actually work in this transition period. And I think that's the key. We tend to leave the decision to retire to something happening and making an abrupt change to it.
yeah,
And we're
yeah,
not then conditioned to basically take that kind of ownership, accountability, and go, right, okay, because it's happened in a blur. And in that blur, in a blur that means you probably haven't engaged, you haven't, and I say this, educated yourself
yeah,
in a way,
yeah,
you have the ability to make some terrible decisions.
yeah,
I'll bore you one thing: pension freedom.
yeah,
we moved in 2014 away from something that a pension was supposed to be, which I always say it's that from pot to pay. You suddenly went to here's the ability to make some really terrible decisions with the money that you've just accrued over 40 years of your working life. And because it's a point of, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way to anyone, but it's at a point of ignorance, a point of distrust, we can make some awful decisions. So, one of the things I think was really important about the way I approached this was I conditioned myself within that kind of 5 years, 60 payday. I really thought about the big decisions I had to make this side as the decisions that I would be making the other side. That empowered me to be really comfortable stepping through the door as much as I could be. I still would say you step through the door with preconceived ideas that suddenly then boom, boom, boom. No, hold on, I never really thought that. And time was the one that really struck me. The bit we were just talking about.
Really interesting. So a couple of things that you said there, Damian, really made me think about a book that I read. And again, one of the most amazing social psychology books available called The Paradox of Choice, right? And how we make decisions about our life. And actually, too much choice, knowing that you can do everything often means that we do nothing or we choose something that we should do. And I think pension freedoms is an interesting point, because now we can do anything with our pension. Sometimes we make decisions that aren't in our best longer term interests, but also with our lives, right? Because when we can do anything, we can turn around and go, you know what, I quite like a social drink. I'll have a drink, and it's putting those guardrails in place, which is difficult to do individually, I think, to make sure that you're sort of living a life of that is important to you. Talk to me about this 60-day thing, because this is an interesting one. We've talked about the fact that we've talked about the fact that there's certain things that hit you in the face that not the 60 day, the 60 paychecks wouldn't have prepared you for.
Yeah.
Where do you feel that was of benefit and of use? Because I like that as a concept.
I think the 60 paydays, I think it really helped, as I say, condition your brain to what's actually happening next. Yeah. And again, I think important, at my age, this is about basically retiring in the sense of retiring from my primary career.
Yeah.
Not that I'll never basically go and have human capital through, whatever it may well be, but it was the ability to kind of educate myself and go through the motions of what, if it isn't this time as full retirement, it will be at a later point in time.
Yeah.
The bits that I think is really important, and again, some of the decision making that we make, is because when we get to retirement, suddenly we have capital that we've probably never really had before, access to capital anyway. We're drip on income. That's how we have lived our lives. We spend based on that income that comes through the door every month.
Yeah.
What I wanted to do was, before that actual event happened, understood better the concept of actually how I was going to use my human capital in that 5-year period, each of those 60 days. So I kind of created benchmarks of what I wanted to do. The wedding, I wanted to take the children across America. They were things that would deplete my capital in retirement too quickly.
Yeah.
This side of the fence, before I got there, it would hurt me on the income side, but I could bounce back on that.
Right? Yeah, you can replace it. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and that is the truth of the matter. Giving yourself, and that meant that, as I say, when I came to this movement, this kind of initial part of retirement and what I wanted to do, I'd got a lot of what I would describe the big ticker items out of the way. The maintenance of the house, I basically bought a kind of house back up in Southport. One of the best things you can ever do is move out of the South and get a nice big house in the North. No, the stupid thing about that, in retirement, you are going to spend such an elongated period of time in a house. Now, in the north, or you can buy something that is huge. It's got space. You don't feel cramped in it.
Well, that's really.
It's a mindset.
Now, the interview you're listening to today is also available to watch on our YouTube channel. If you'd like more content, exclusive content that's not available on the podcast, you can visit at What Happens Next Life. And whilst you're there, I want to ask you a favour. We want to help as many people as possible navigate, if they're in their 50s and 60s, what's going to happen next in their lives. The easiest and freest way you can do it is subscribe to our YouTube channel. So today, I'd love for you to do that. Thank you. So it's really interesting. We've just moved. So we moved 4 months ago. And I'm a typical East Londoner. So I've done that thing where started off deep in the East End of London and then just slowly moved out to Essex. And now I'm 10 minutes away from the beach. So I couldn't take the house any further. Do you know, I can't move any further. But when we were looking, and we live in a little seaside village called Leigh-on-Sea, beautiful, good cafe culture, really, really nice place to live. But my wife's family, all when her dad retired, he retired up to Scotland. They live in our Arbroath. They live in a little fishing village. And as you say, what you get for your money, because I can get a train into London in 45 minutes, is completely different. But then you've got more freedom of time, right? So that element actually it's a real interesting one. So talked about the money side, the 60 paydays to retirement money side. How better prepared were you using that concept around the other aspects of well-being in your life, or did it still hit you when you moved into that movement?
So one of the things I definitely did do is that idea of my health, specifically health. One of the things, again, look, we all work in stressful jobs. I've got older brothers, so in some respects, I don't need an age app. I can just look at them and I know what's coming because we share the DNA. Health was an important place for me. Wellman clinics go on it because, again, it gives you a window of what's happening to your body. Retirement is about health as much as wealth. I was diagnosed with hypertension. My cholesterol levels had gone from not particularly being anything to be concerned about to something, there is a myriad of things that within that 60 payday window, I became more and more aware of. I could do some bits about it, but not huge, because again, the day job gets in the way of you basically being able to do what you really needed to do. One of the things that I did do is mentally prepare, right, as soon as effectively the cliff edge, retirement, whatever, is, I can actually take better control of my health. I'm working on the blood pressure. I'm getting out and I'm walking more. I've done some of these walking vlogs, retirement postcards. I'm training for the Camino in a couple of weeks' time. All this is all about my physical well-being. Because, I cannot stress how important, we don't look at retirement in a linear, your health goes like that. I call it the go-go, the slow go, and the no-go. And that world will constrict around you as your health basically deteriorates. You are not different from anyone else. So that's never going to happen to me. It will. And therefore, the idea of looking after your health whilst you still can is so, so important. And as I say, that kind of conditioning of mindset within the 60 days, 60 paydays was really important. I knew what I needed to do this side. And as I said, I took action on that side. I don't think people do enough of that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the conversation around what happens next is saying, the sole focused on the accumulation of capital, money, wealth, whatever you want to call it. If you're not physically fit enough to live the life you want, it's a bit academic, isn't it? Because you might have all these. I mean, there's two things that you said, Damon, that are really interesting. If you've got a plan and you know you're going to, you know that financially you're on track to achieve what you need to in that next stage of your life, what's stopping you doing some of the things that you want to do today while the income's coming in? I think there's a massive argument to do that. I also think, yes, that thinking about a life after what's next in stages is fair, because what we want to do in our 50s and 60s is going to be different in our 70s and 80s, and thinking about it in stages is really important. But you said something really interesting that I've been thinking about quite a lot recently around value and purpose, particularly at work. And I in my 20s, 30s, and early 40s, work for me was about providing financially for me and my family. As the business has grown and we've built something fairly sustainable, I do a journal every day and think about sort of what I want. And money's not part of that anymore. Actually, it's about positive impact and the changes we make in the world. Now, part of that is being rewarded fairly for our expertise, but the motivation is different. How's your motivation change when you, because it sounds like that was part of the reason you put that 5-year notice in.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it is about, the epitaph I've got at the moment is pension personality of the year 2020. And I don't want that epitaph on my grave. And look, it's not to say that basically I'm here to change the world. That'd be, inane. But I do want, as you say, to have a purpose that basically can have an impact. And hopefully with some of the work that I've done up to now, that there is a kind of nuance that's there. But I think, the money bit. As you say, I think the key bit here is this kind of idea of reset in my head, going from what is effectively full time, because I can't go back to that kind of full time world, because I've got already very used to free time, to the idea I want to look after my health. I've said, and on my LinkedIn thing, if anyone ever thinks that I can help them, drop me a line and I'll talk to you. And I've actually had, even within the retirement space, several calls with several people going, look, I've liked what you've heard, and I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it because I'd like to. No issue. It's a delight to help like-minded people, or indeed not like-minded people, try and create a better world.
Yeah, 100%.
I think, and as I say, if I can add value doing trustees or mentorship, which I do for some people, just reach out. I mean, I'm not sitting there saying I'm actually going to be any use, but I'm very happy to give it a go. And if you don't like it, just tell me. And great, I'll start reading the book again. But I am here because I'm privileged enough that I've got to this place. So I want to give it back down the line. Why wouldn't you? I mean, I don't get this mentality of basically I've got here and I'm going to keep it all for myself. No, I'm really, really lucky for a person that ain't got much of a brain. I ain't done too bad for myself. Yeah, and if I can help others achieve.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that. But one of the things that, because I'm writing the What Happens Next book in a minute, and one of the things that I talk about before I started What Happens Next, and in a desire to connect with my then teenage daughter, I'm going back 7 or 8 years, I started a podcast on kindness called The Kindness Project. And it became popular, and we wrote a book, and it did really well. And we raised, tens of thousands of pounds for a charity, and I loved the experience, particularly because at the start I didn't know how to speak to Charlotte, who at the time was 12 and a half. And because we ran this podcast for 7 years, she had to talk to me every week. But we interviewed loads of people on kindness. And the interesting thing is the good it does you. The good it does you giving back, because it triggers all of the right hormones and, endorphins and dopamine and all of that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So I think people who have got the mindset of, Scrooge McDuck style, just like accumulating their wealth. And I'm not talking about giving money away, but certainly if you've got more time, giving some of that away is probably a mindset good for other people, but also good for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting to talk about kindness. I tried and failed very badly to do this whole concept of eudaimonia. It's quite fashionable now, but it was Aristotle's kind of happiness and flourishing. And I wanted to put it into the context of the workplace and one, live and breathe it within the environment that I found myself and the people that work with me alongside me, but also try to get organizations to embrace this concept of, if you can get a person to flourish by nudging and helping them along, sometimes a coercion that is needed for them to, the happiness that can create and the kind of unity within the work didn't go anywhere. I mean, but, I can understand the kindness thing because it is that drive. That is, if I really wanted to get back there, that is what I think is me.
Yeah.
How do you create this environment that people can be happy within the means that they have? You can't sit there and go, oh, here's £1 million. That doesn't happen. But actually, within the means that you've got, how can you actually maximize the outcome in terms of what you have? How can you basically grow and be happy? That, I think, that would be a lovely epitaph rather than just pension personality of the year.
And there's a great interview we did with a guy called John Dunkley that we'll put wherever this interview is going to be in the notes below, where we explore in depth the concept of eudaimonia, and it's certainly going to appear in the What Happens Next book, because when I was thinking about happiness, I was thinking about that in a way that effectively was about that hedonistic happiness and the purpose happiness, and I was missing the bliss bit. I was missing that community bit. So we're going to be talking about a lot of that in the book. Now, I'm going to be a bit controversial, Damian, because I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with one of our What Happens Next guests, where he wasn't a fan of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I know you love that concept. So for our audience who don't know what that is, what is it, and where does it give us advantages when we're thinking about what happens next? But what are the potential downsides?
Oh, well, there are no downsides, Nick. No, look, so the great, again, I'm not a philosopher. I'm just this monkey that talks. I'm sitting here going, and a lot of this is what we've talked about it. There is an ethereal nature to what's next. There always is, because actually, do you know what? It hasn't happened. We don't know.
Yeah.
So if it's ethereal, what do we if we can't see it, we can't taste it, we can't smell it, we're going to be wary of it. We're going to make poor decisions around it. So when I was sitting there, and this goes back probably about 8-9 years ago, I was trying, and it's not just about retirement, but I've kind of lent itself now very much to the kind of retirement. I was talking about the kind of wider thought process about financial well-being and trying to get people to create their own framework of how they spend money. So it's using the hierarchy of Maslow, but it isn't Maslow in that sense. Yeah. And what I wanted to try and explain to people, and I'll talk about the retirement side rather than the broader picture, but if you think about retirement, human needs are multifaceted. I was talking to someone, I've got about 1,000 different needs. How do you cater for 1,000 different needs? We'll break those needs down into smaller components. To me, a basic requirement of life is the bottom of Maslow. It is the shelter, it's utility, it's food. I know you can add Wi-Fi onto it nowadays, but that absolutely is the base. And it would be lovely that we had a state pension. I'm not going to get into the winter fuel stuff or anything else like that, but it would be lovely that actually we had, at least at the very base level, Maslow, a state pension that covered that. We don't. I don't think so anymore. So we have to save above and beyond. And what I wanted to try and do is the other problem we have, and then I will get around to answering this question, but there's so many levels to it. We are so remote from death nowadays. And we don't talk about it. People don't die. They pass away. It's like they've just fell behind the sofa. People die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Get over it. What you've got is the question of we don't know when. Longevity. If I'm sitting there at the very beginning of my journey into retirement and I'm looking at what is it that I really, really need to have to keep alive, it is that base cost of Maslow.
Yeah.
Now, for me, the first thing that should trigger in anyone's mind, and I do this as a household, it's not just the individual, by the way, it's you, your household. I'm going to make sure that for as long as I live, effectively, that base is covered. Now, whether you annuitize or you CDC it or I don't care. I'm not a product guy. I'm telling you about the needs. Yeah. My need is that I am never going to run out of money that I fall below. Yeah. The next level up is, look, I've achieved that. Even if I've got shelter, I need insurance. Maybe I want health insurance. I need car. Well, I need insurance. So there's a security aspect. So we've gone from base plus security. I'm then thinking about this kind of connectivity. We talk about health and we talk about purpose. Social integration. We are social animals. You can, as I like to do, sit in the walls of my house, which is why I moved north, because it's nice and it's big. But I need to come out the house every now and again. And I need to integrate into society, which means that I'll go for a meal. I could go down the pub. I could do that. To me is this idea of comfort spend. Now that comfort spend could extend into maybe the base form of transport, but actually for comfort, I want a car that I'm going to run for X period of time. Okay, well, the end of that, that's comfort spend. And then you have your aspirational spend. Instead of basically comfort spend being, a couple of weeks in Blackpool or Southend, I want to basically aspirationally, I'm going to take 3 months out and do something. I'm going to go to the Amazon forest. That's aspirational. Now, I think that when we actually really kind of peel the onion back and look at behaviors, we can use that Maslow hierarchy to fit in what we're going to do with our money and how we're planned.
And it's interesting. I think the perspective we had from Ian, who gave a really interesting, was we don't satisfy any of those needs in isolation. Actually, they're all interlinked and intermingled. But when we're thinking about the money conversation, I think you're right. And it's interesting because when we're building financial plans for clients, one of the things we do on the budget plan that we give to people as a template is say, here's your minimum, because that's your needs. Here's some of your wants, and it might include travel. But thinking about it from a more nuanced way is really interesting. One thing I want to just talk about, because you've talked about the biggest challenge being time and finding things to spend it successfully. How is you had this 60 payday preparation, but it still hit you hard. What have you learned in this sort of period about if you could go back to start your 60-day payday, knowing what you know now, how would you think about time differently and potentially make change?
Do you know, I don't think I would.
Yeah,
I don't think I would, because I still, as I say, I mean, the difficulty here is it's still this kind of early flush of retirement. Yeah. So it's very hard. And I don't like the idea of critiquing myself, because life is, I have a general direction of travel. We touched on this. Yeah. And actually, it's going in that general direction. So I have no regrets. Je regrette rien. I don't regret. I think that, if I was to sit there and go, actually, Danny, it's lovely to have you around the house until you're actually around the house, and then suddenly it's not. But I can do something about that, to me, it's not lit.
I get it. And that incremental change in the right direction is all you need, right? It doesn't matter, because as long as you're moving slowly in the right direction and going, actually, you know, I think I mentioned it sort of before we started talking about. There's loads of um, uh, great quotes that I love about planning, but my favourite is from Mike Tyson, who said, "Planning is great until you get whacked in the face." And it's true. When we sit down with people and say, "Here's your plan," we always say that the process of planning is important, but don't expect a plan to go to plan.
Yep.
And as long as we're moving in the sort of general right direction, we're sort of getting there.
Yeah, look, and I think this thing about Maslow again, because I will come back to Maslow, because I think this is really important. When we actually sit there and think about Maslow, and this whole idea of retirement, I mean, I've got nothing against people that do retirement counseling. I really don't. But it's almost like, I'm going to talk to you at a very specific point in time, and then I'm away. Got nothing else to do with it. It's a continuum. And the whole idea of Maslow is that it's not fixed. It basically is, where you are now, this is how you're going to be spending money based on what you want, your needs, your requirements. But as your health changes and you go from that go-go to slow-go and no-go, what you're going to spend in the comfort area and in aspirational is going to be vastly different. My dad's 96, nearly 97, and I cannot afford to live that long. He basically sits in his house and he has digestive biscuits and he goes to the library on a bus for free. And, that's his life.
Yeah.
He still has a house that he has to heat and he has to pay the council tax and he has to do. So the base bit's still there. The comfort bit and the aspirational does not exist for him.
Yeah.
So I really do despise, more than anything, is that we paint the picture of retirement as a linear thing that looks like that. Yeah. It isn't. Yeah. It's constant points of change along a timeline based on how you are, your partner is, the experiences around you, how the markets are doing in terms of you cannot be driven by, this is what I'm going to do at this point in time, and that is it forever. That's the next 30 years of my life, because it just won't happen.
But here's what I've learned from working with clients going through transition. I think the challenge we've got is we've got these big picture concepts of 3 different stages. The reality is a lot of my clients go through that period of 6 months where they're still just trying to navigate what it means to them. And then another 6 months where they go, I think I've got this sorted. I'm going to play a bit more golf. And then I'll have a meeting the following year and they'll say to me, you know what? Golf was great as a hobby. It's not good as a job. So I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think the element of like, as you say, it's like we give support at one off particular point in time and go, right, off you go. You're prepared now. Yeah. Without understanding that evolution of mindset as time goes on. How can we do that better?
Because look, I mean, I'd grab out my mobile phone and go, "Here's how you do it," but I don't have my phone on me because it'd be rude. The golf joke is basically where he buys the set for the wife and basically has a divorce within the year. Silver splicers are what they called. Divorce rates massively shoot up because suddenly you're in a relationship you don't want to be with, because it was great because they were at work and I was at work and now we've got to spend all these times together and actually I don't really like you anymore. So that fallacy about the golf and what you do, I think is really important. I think the other really serious thing here, 40% increase in depression as you go into retirement. And actually, I think there's a bizarre, and this is, I did a post on this, I got married 2 weeks ago. There was a marriage wedding ceremony. I am now in a marriage. There is a clear point here, which was a celebration and a wedding, and now I am in this bit here. Yeah. We have retirement. And there is no kind of understanding that there is a point of change at which, and then there is this thing that's actually going to exist and continue over here. I think we really need to kind of get that mindset built in, because otherwise, as you say, we kind of drop into it. We're uncertain. I think we should give ourselves permission that we have moments where, hey, look, for 6 months, I don't care. I'm just going to do whatever it is. But what I am going to do is ring fence, and I'll say 10,000 quid for the sake of saying 10,000 quid. It could be £5,000, it could be 100,000. I'm going to ring fence that money for my movement, and I'm going to just enjoy doing whatever it is I'm going to do and not feel guilty, not feel. I did 5 weeks straight away from finishing work. I literally did cold turkey, went off to France for 5 weeks. At the end of the first week, me and Danny sat there going, we haven't done anything. Oh, God. And there was a sense of bizarre guilt.
Interesting.
That we hadn't actually done anything. And you're like, oh, isn't this what we're supposed to? This is the learning things. You learn.
Yeah. It's that element of like...
You can show.
I think we're conditioned to be productive often, aren't we, in our working lives? And trying to shape that habit is really difficult. There's two elements that are really interesting. We were, before the interview, we were talking about books. And a book, quite a hard-hitting book, but one I love, and I reckon I read it when I was 19, is The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt. Now, I wouldn't propose following the Dice Man's philosophy entirely, but I liked, there was a travel documentary that I loved a few years ago. And I think part of my movement is just, and I've said to my daughter, I'd love to do this, just turning up at an airport, like bunch of cash, here's turning up at an airport with a dice and going, let's pick 6 destinations and then just spending 6 months doing that. Do you know what I mean? Just like, so letting the dice decide where we go.
Yeah. As long as you're not doing it for black or red on a roulette table, which I've heard someone did. Yeah, The Dice Man is a very dangerous book. And probably a lot of it is
very, very interesting in terms of that expansion of thought element and thinking about sort of what the options are in terms of your life. One thing that I've been thinking about quite a lot, and I'm writing about this in the book, and we've spoke about on the What Happens Next YouTube channel, is the importance of social relationships. And I realised probably 5 6 years ago that a lot of my social relationships were based on the world of work, because I was spending so much time in that world that actually my connections weren't only from like and again, I'm lucky enough that I work with amazing people who I really like, but I realised that if I didn't have that world of work, I'd probably be quite lonely. And there's a concept by a guy called Arthur C. Brooks that I like, called fantastically useless friends, which talks about the fact that that we should cultivate some friends in our life where there's no function, there's no commercial benefit to having that relationship. How have you found your social well-being change in this period of time? And what do you think about having those social connections outside of work? And how do you nurture them, particularly when you're so busy doing the work?
Yeah, I mean, I am not. It's bizarre as someone that would describe themselves as humanist. I'm not a people person. Right. And a lot of my social interaction, in fact, I'd say 95% was within the workplace and workplace only. I've got a group of mates that I've known since 11, and we'll see each other once a year. There's now the social kind of media aspect to that kind of group, but interestingly, whether I'm slightly socially awkward or not, again, a bit strange for the living I do. I've got a dog. Now, I didn't get a dog specifically for a retirement, but what it does do, it helps in terms of social interaction. It also helps in terms of health. But I've also started to know that within the environment around me, there are more men in my situation who are kind of sitting there coming together and having these chats. Yeah. Because you're right. 95% of it was over here. And that friendship group is not there anymore. I'll tell you a story of my brother. He was still going into the kind of staff canteen after he'd left until they politely said, "You don't work here anymore."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I think this is a Qantas story. Qantas were doing a lot of work. Retirees were coming in to the Qantas building in Sydney to do chit chats. And actually, someone explained, going, how is this helping people? Because you're just re-encouraging this re-engagement at this level and not that engagement there. I know one of the things I have to improve for my well-being, that bigger well-being, is social integration. I know it, and I am taking steps, and I am being far more pleasant than I would ever usually be in social environment, because I understand the importance. I understand the importance.
And I it's really interesting, Damon, because I look at Cassie, my wife, who just seems to take this in her stride. And I think it is again, we're all different, and there'll be women who are not that great and men who are fantastic at it. But it does seem a finding friendship, and I've had to work really hard at this over the last couple of years. Finding friendships outside of work takes work, doesn't it? That's the reality of it. We need to make an effort to do it. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit.
Very late in life, as you say, which is.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit, because we're both in the world of having conversations about money and retirement and helping people plan for their financial futures. But part of the reason we're doing What Happens Next is I don't think as a profession in the world of financial planning and in an industry more generally, we probably do enough. What could we do as a profession and industry to help people plan and prepare more?
Okay, so I've always worked consultancy side. I did 6 weeks for a provider once upon a time. Didn't like it. But the providers are the ones that make the change, because they have the economies of scale of people. I don't think that it's interesting. You're my policyholder. No, I've got all my assets with you. You should be working on my behalf.
Yeah.
If actually they listened to people's needs about wrapping up not just the assets that I have with them, but an understanding of, actually go back to that base of Maslow and what I'm spending money on, create economies of scale, and utilize the kind of power of my pound to reduce that pound cost burden for me. Not just invest my money, but basically reduce. I did a poll recently, 92% said, wouldn't it be great if, because workplace benefits stop, that the provider actually provides a kind of replacement type flex scheme where basically, again, using economies of scale, I can actually purchase benefits through them. They don't have, or I think accept, that they have a responsibility being a provider for life. Yeah, they have means to create community, to cascade stories and narratives, we say, about how people learn, the tricks of the trade. They have it within their wit to do something that I think is the societal good that we are screaming for, to join all the dots, to bring in health, not just wealth, to think not just pension and save more, but basically help you spend better. They can do it. The question I would pose to any provider is, why are you not doing this? I see that they have a very transactional relationship with their clients. I'll tell you one story. Wasn't even a bank manager. It's whoever he is. He's called Nathan, lives your part of the world, beautiful bloke. Picked up the phone. How are you, Damian? Talks to me every quarter. I've got no money with them. Sent me a bottle of champagne for the wedding. I booked a table at a restaurant. I said, look, it's the honeymoon. Sat, Damian, got a really nice table for you, handwritten card, everything, really took 5 minutes of the time just to make me feel special, as did Nathan. My pension provider, where I have a vast amount, I say vast amount, an asset that to me is huge as this Scally. It's a big pot of money. I want to top it up because it makes sense in terms of high rate tax relief for me.
Yeah.
Well, you're employed. No, I'm not. I'm self-employed. They know nothing about me. They don't care to know anything about me.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
transactional relationship. I want to have an experience. I want to work with someone that cares about me. And I don't think the providers get it, that is the role and the function that they can have.
And I look at it from two perspectives, interestingly. If I'm looking at it from the role of a financial planner, actually the providers create a gap that people like me fill, right? Because actually people want want a relationship with somebody that they like, know, and trust, that can guide them through the journey. The challenge is for me to run my small chartered independent financial planning practice is expensive, but I also want to make a living as well, and that means that cost is then sort of on burden on the consumer. So I'm sort of grateful they don't, because I get to make a living and then get to do great stuff like this and help people in a different way. But you're right, that economy of scale that providers have got to have positive impact in the world to millions of people, if they had more nuanced conversations about this sort of stuff, is interesting.
And great communities. But I don't understand. 92% of people go, that's what I want from my provider. Well, why don't you provide it?
Yeah, it's interesting.
At the moment, as you say, your role and responsibility, as you say, is to provide that to the people that can afford it. What I'm saying is, and rightly or wrongly, that a lot of people can't, and they're the ones that are going to really suffer in retirement because the wealth aspect is just going to fall off a cliff. They need the help, and the providers can give that. They're not going to plug massive financial gaps, but they're probably going to educate you how you actually, cut your cloth from what you've got.
Yeah, 100%. But also have those conversations about, as you say, that, what's your 60 payday plan for making sure you're maintaining wealth and health and doing the other stuff you need to think about. Now, I love the fact that on a lot of your videos, you've got Bowie in the background, and I'm a massive fan as well. What do you reckon Bowie can teach us about navigating change? And because he was a futurist, right? You see videos about him, you go, like he sort of understood the power of the internet 10 years before it existed, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the Paxman interview. Yeah. Look, I adore Bowie, and a lot of how I've shaped my life and thought about the world is actually shaped through a lot of what I've seen of Bowie. He wasn't just about music. He was an icon. He was a movie star. The way he dressed, the way he basically talked about sexuality. There is something about him. One of the things I would say, and I've lived my life through it, he talked about the idea if your feet are firmly at the bottom of the kind of the sea, you're too comfortable. You want to be tippy-toppy, tappy, so your head's just above, because that uncomfortableness is what life is about. I love that. And I think for retirement, in the go-go stage, you should never forget the playful nature of an individual. Don't be constrained by your corporate identity. Get back to that tippy-tappy, feeling uncomfortable. Uncomfortable isn't bad. It's great.
Yeah.
As you go through the slow-go and into the no-go, Mr. Bowie probably was wrong. You've got to put your feet firmly down on that ground because you need more security and you need more sense, ability, because the world is changing around you, your cognitive ability. But that go-go stage, forget all the corporate that you've basically had instilled in you for 40 years, go and play. And that to me is Bowie.
Yeah. There's Lars' book recommendation. There's a great book by Bill Burnett called Design Your Life that talks about that importance of play when we're thinking about navigating change in our life. And he uses the phrase incremental experimentation, like just try stuff, give it a go. If you like it, great, you can incorporate it. If you don't, what have you lost? You've lost a bit of time trying something new out. You mentioned about you're up for conversations that might be useful. Where can people connect with you or find you?
Well, Twitter or whatever they call it nowadays, I'm Eudaimonia man, so I still hang on to that dream. Bowie. It's not Bowie actually. LinkedIn. The one weird thing is there's only one Damian Stancombe in the world. So unique. if you want to find me on LinkedIn, there's the easiest. That's where I do most of my stuff. Very easy to get me.
All right. And thank you for your insight. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, mate, I've had an absolute blast. So thank you very much indeed for the invite to join you today, Chris.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining us on What Happens Next. Hopefully you find that useful. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. As I said, our mission is to help more people. Have a lovely day, and we'll speak to you on What Happens Next. So there's, I know, a lot in that interview that you're going to get a lot out of. And I love there was a bit of David Bowie or Bowie. I don't know what you write in the notes, write in the comments what way it is. David Bowie or Bowie chat in there as well. But as always, I'd love for you to tell me one thing you learnt from today's show. Feel free to put it in the comments or email us, and all the details to do that are in the show notes. Have a lovely day, and we'll see you on What Happens Next soon.